Something is seriously wrong, but nobody is talking about it. In the shadows of World War II, whispers of an American spy unit vanished without a trace. Official records don't exist. Files that should tell the story have been redacted, stamped, or simply destroyed. Survivors speak in fragments, hinting at missions that defy logic, operations that could not have happened with the technology known to exist at the time. Even the names of those involved are buried, erased from history as if they never lived. They called it Project Blackwing, though almost nothing about it has ever been confirmed. Some historians dismiss it as rumor. Others, however, suggest it was more than rumor. It was a hidden military experiment, a team trained to do the impossible. Eyewitness accounts speak of gadgets that should have been science fiction. Devices that could intercept enemy communications before they were sent, vehicles that could vanish into thin air, and weapons that left no trace but fear. But if any of this is true, why has no one in official channels ever acknowledged it? Stories emerge from old military correspondences, letters that survived, and memoirs written in hushed tones. They describe soldiers recruited not for their strength or bravery, but for their intellect, their willingness to bend reality. Engineers, mathematicians, cryptographers, men and women whose talents could rival any top-secret program ever known. They were promised anonymity, protection, and access to technology beyond comprehension. And then, just as quickly as they appeared, they were gone. In small towns across the United States, families remember receiving notices that a relative died in service. But the details never matched conventional war reports. No missing in action records, no battlefield citations, nothing that could place them anywhere near Europe or the Pacific theaters. One letter, discovered decades later in a hidden drawer, described a mission in which operatives were sent behind enemy lines with devices that emitted light patterns capable of disorienting entire battalions. The sender never signed it, fearing retaliation, but the detail was too precise to dismiss. The military archives remained silent. The National Archives, which house millions of documents from the war, contain only fragments. Blueprints of unidentifiable machines, telegrams marked top secret, and memos that hint at experiments the public was never meant to know. Researchers who have tried to follow these threads often vanish from public discourse, leaving questions that multiply rather than resolve. Was this unit real? So what was their true mission? And why would an entire program, potentially capable of changing the course of the war, be erased from history? There are mentions in foreign intelligence records, scattered in reports from British, German, and Japanese files. The Germans referred to an American unit with almost supernatural capabilities, operatives who could move unseen, intercept messages before they were sent, and even sabotage critical operations without leaving a trace. The Japanese documents describe mysterious explosions in areas that had no apparent military target, followed by the sudden disappearance of enemy patrols. Could these be accounts of the same unit the US later erased? Some theories suggest that what was being tested went beyond espionage. Could the technology involve early forms of radar manipulation, stealth mechanics, or even experimental propulsion systems? One engineer, interviewed decades later under condition of anonymity, described seeing blueprints for devices that seemed to bend the battlefield, capable of altering enemy perception in ways that were thought impossible at the time. But every mention was quickly classified, the engineer warned, and the threat of legal consequences ensured silence. Oddly, decades after the war, some of the operatives who survived appear to have vanished into civilian life without explanation. They resurfaced in academic positions, in government advisory roles, or sometimes in obscure corporations with links to aerospace and communications technology. Their lives were ordinary on the surface, yet traces of their knowledge hinted at an expertise far beyond the standards of their fields. Was this transition intentional? Were they embedded to continue experiments covertly under the guise of peacetime projects? Family members of missing soldiers report strange phenomena. Relatives recall equipment disappearing from homes, letters shredded without explanation, and in some cases, men returning with no memory of months spent abroad. One woman recounted her uncle, a former operative, waking in the middle of the night shouting numbers in German and Japanese, claiming he had seen things no human should see. These stories are often dismissed as delusions, PTSD, or exaggeration, yet multiple accounts follow an eerily similar pattern. Even more unsettling are the so-called ghost files, leaked documents that describe exercises which read like science fiction. One describes a device capable of transmitting a voice over miles without wires, effectively allowing an operative to speak into enemy lines undetected. Another suggests a cloaking apparatus for vehicles, something that could allow a small team to infiltrate heavily fortified positions without detection. If these reports are true, the US military may have had technology decades ahead of anything publicly acknowledged. Historians caution against jumping to conclusions. They warn that memory is fragile, documents can be misinterpreted, and the fog of war distorts every account. Yet the convergence of anomalies, from survivor testimony to foreign intelligence reports, forms a pattern that refuses to be ignored. There are gaps in the historical record where official documents should exist. There are names mentioned only in classified appendices. And there are occasional references in scientific journals, disguised as theoretical experiments, that mirror the capabilities described in the whispers about Project Blackwing. Why cover it up? Some suggest that revealing such a program would have caused panic during the war or undermined alliances. Others propose that the technology itself was considered too dangerous, too destabilizing, a secret so powerful it could not be trusted in the wrong hands. And still, the most disturbing possibility remains. What if it wasn't just a wartime experiment, but a foundation for post-war military programs that continue to operate in shadows today? The line between fact and fiction blurs further when examining the few surviving witnesses. One former operative, speaking only on condition of anonymity, described an assignment where the unit deployed devices that could interfere with enemy radar and communications simultaneously, effectively rendering entire regions blind. He spoke in cryptic phrases, claiming the technology worked in ways that violated every known law of physics at the time. When pressed for details, he fell silent, glancing nervously at the door, a gesture that implied someone, or something, was still listening. Even decades later, anomalies persist in military archives. Blueprints for vehicles that never existed, photographs of men in uniforms with untraceable insignias, and equipment that has no known counterpart. Some researchers speculate that these could be early prototypes for stealth or electronic warfare systems. Others wonder if they were experiments abandoned because they were too effective, too disruptive, too dangerous to deploy. Every lead circles back to the same unsettling question. How much of what we know about World War II is actually true, and how much has been meticulously erased? Rumors persist of an entire wing of the military dedicated to impossible operations. Officers with clearance higher than the president's aides, scientists whose papers never appeared in journals, and spies whose missions were never recorded. The few hints we have suggest a network designed to operate entirely outside conventional oversight. If it existed, it could explain gaps in intelligence reports, sudden and inexplicable battlefield victories, and even anomalies in post-war technological development. Was Project Blackwing a one-time experiment, or the beginning of a hidden military frontier? Families who tried to investigate were often met with silence or intimidation. Letters returned unopened, archives closed to the public, files redacted beyond recognition. Whistleblowers reported threats, and in some cases, sudden relocations or mysterious accidents. These layers of obstruction only deepen the mystery. If there was nothing to hide, why such extreme measures? The more one digs, the more it seems the truth is deliberately buried, and the deeper the silence, the louder the questions scream. Foreign archives add another layer of unease. British intelligence reports describe encounters with Americans performing missions that seemed impossible. One memo notes a team entering a heavily defended German installation and exiting without detection, leaving no evidence of intrusion. The language is cautious, almost incredulous, hinting at disbelief among those documenting the events. Yet the details are precise. Dates, locations, even equipment sketches, though none match known wartime machinery. German files tell a similar story. They speak of operatives who moved faster than reconnaissance could track, appearing in unexpected locations and then vanishing. Commanders expressed frustration, labeling them ghosts who could strike with surgical precision. Some entries suggest experiments with communications interception that were far beyond the technological capabilities of the 1940s. Was this a glimpse into a hidden future of warfare, hidden in the chaos of a global conflict? The Japanese intelligence accounts are even stranger. Reports describe sudden disruptions in defensive positions, radio signals scrambled without explanation, and explosions in places that should have been empty. One analyst wrote of a shadow team that seemed to anticipate enemy movements, almost as if they knew the plans before they were made. These documents were classified for decades, only declassified in fragments that raise more questions than answers. Survivors' accounts are no less disturbing. One former operative recalled a mission in which the team tested a device capable of making them appear invisible against certain backgrounds. He described crouching in plain sight while enemy patrols walked by without noticing. The memory seemed etched in fear, the operative speaking with a mix of awe and horror at the capabilities they were given. If true, it suggests a level of sophistication that defies historical understanding of World War II technology. Other survivors spoke of disappearing vehicles, machines designed to evade detection not just visually, but electronically. Some vehicles reportedly emitted signals that confused enemy radar, while others seemed to vanish into fog or darkness. Engineers involved in these projects were sworn to secrecy, and many were reportedly reassigned or disappeared after the war, leaving only cryptic notes in technical logs. Could these innovations have influenced post-war military developments? Or were they erased entirely to protect national security secrets? The notion that a secretive unit operated with impossible technology begins to take shape. Historians debate whether these are exaggerations, misinterpretations, or the truth. Documents that survive are often contradictory, yet they consistently describe anomalies, men and machines performing feats beyond the accepted limits of the era. One researcher described the phenomenon as a puzzle in which each missing piece only increases the sense of design, as if the gaps themselves were intentional, engineered to confuse and conceal. Some accounts hint at psychological operations as well. Operatives were reportedly trained to manipulate perception, using light, sound, and even electromagnetic fields to create illusions or mislead enemies. In one file, a unit is described deploying phantom artillery by projecting false radar signals, causing entire enemy brigades to reposition for attacks that never occurred. These tactics blur the line between technology and what would later become modern electronic warfare. The secrecy around this unit extended beyond the war. Several operatives resurfaced decades later in civilian industries, electronics, aerospace, communications, continuing work that mirrored wartime experiments. Patents filed under corporate names bear remarkable resemblance to devices described in wartime memoirs. Were these projects merely an extension of a clandestine military program? Or did they signal an effort to obscure capabilities under the cover of civilian innovation? Families of missing operatives sometimes encountered resistance when asking questions. Letters vanished, calls were ignored, and some even report being shadowed. The military's response, if any, was coldly procedural. No records, no acknowledgement, no explanation. This raises uncomfortable questions about the lengths an institution will go to protect secrets. Were these disappearances for safety or for something darker, an attempt to bury the past entirely? Odd coincidences further complicate the story. Some locations associated with the unit's missions later became sites for experimental military projects. Factories once producing ordinary equipment were repurposed for classified research, and in some cases, aerial photographs from the period reveal structures that appear inconsistent with their supposed function. Were these facilities part of a broader effort to develop and test technology in secret, using wartime cover as camouflage? Historians also note inconsistencies in official casualty records. Soldiers listed as killed in action sometimes left behind conflicting reports or personal effects inconsistent with battlefield deaths. In rare interviews, surviving officers hint at missions where operatives were effectively erased from the official record. They stress that these were highly sensitive operations, ones that could not exist on paper without endangering national security. The technology described in survivor memoirs challenges logic. Devices capable of rapid invisibility, signals interference, and precognition-like intelligence would have far exceeded contemporary science. Some speculate that wartime urgency and the concentration of brilliant minds produced inventions that were intentionally kept secret, not just for operational security, but to prevent knowledge from spreading beyond military control. The consequences of public exposure could have been catastrophic. Rumors of continuing operations fuel the controversy. Some veterans suggest that experiments conducted by Project Blackwing were incorporated into post-war programs, influencing Cold War strategy, electronic surveillance, and even early stealth technology. If so, the legacy of the unit extends far beyond the 1940s, leaving a shadow over decades of military development. The impossibility of verifying these claims only deepens the intrigue. Unexplained anomalies persist in photographic archives. Images of vehicles and personnel from the war occasionally show figures and machinery not accounted for in official records. Shadows inconsistent with known objects, unexplained shapes, and uniform insignias that cannot be matched appear in high-resolution photographs. Skeptics suggest errors or misidentifications, but repeated patterns across independent sources suggest something deliberate, something hidden in plain sight. Even the terminology raises questions. Codenames, acronyms, and project titles appear across classified documents but have no known civilian equivalent. Linguists analyzing intercepted communications note that some phrases correspond to no known language, or appear constructed to convey operational meaning only to insiders. If the unit existed, its members may have operated under an entirely separate communication system designed to isolate them from conventional oversight. The ethical implications are profound. If soldiers were deployed with advanced technology and erased from records, what responsibility does the government bear toward them or their families? And if post-war applications continued under secrecy, what does that say about transparency in science and military power? Every new piece of evidence raises questions not just about history, but about the present, and what we may never know about hidden operations that shaped the modern world. The mystery grows darker when personal journals surface, hidden for decades in attics and forgotten trunks. These journals do not read like war diaries. They read like confessions. One describes a night operation where time itself seemed distorted, minutes stretching unnaturally long as a team crossed enemy territory without being seen. The writer admits he could not explain what kept them hidden, only that the device they carried hummed softly, vibrating like a living thing in his hands. Another journal speaks of fear not of the enemy, but of their own equipment. The writer describes a machine that responded unpredictably, occasionally activating without command. When it did, nearby radios fell silent and compasses spun wildly. He wondered if they were testing something unfinished, something no one fully understood. The journal ends abruptly, the final page torn out, leaving the reader with a sense that even writing about it felt dangerous. These journals raise a chilling possibility. What if the technology was not fully controlled? What if the reason for the cover-up was not its power, but its instability? Wartime desperation can push boundaries, and in that urgency, mistakes can be buried along with successes. A classified memo references containment failures during field tests, though it never explains what needed to be contained. The vagueness feels intentional, as if even the writers were afraid to be specific. Some former intelligence officers suggest that the unit operated under direct presidential authorization, bypassing traditional command structures. If true, this would explain why so few records exist. Programs that operate outside standard military channels leave behind almost nothing. Orders are verbal, reports are destroyed, participants are sworn to lifelong silence. This structure would allow an entire unit to disappear from history without a trace. The timing of these alleged operations is also suspicious. Many accounts cluster around critical turning points in the war, battles that shifted unexpectedly, supply lines disrupted without explanation, enemy plans uncovered before execution. Official histories attribute these to luck or superior intelligence. But what if something else was at work? What if an unseen hand, equipped with technology far beyond its time, was shaping outcomes quietly? The secrecy extended even within the military. Regular units reportedly encountered operatives they were told not to question. Soldiers described meeting Americans with unfamiliar equipment, receiving brief assistance, and then being ordered to forget the encounter ever happened. One veteran recalled being warned that speaking about what he saw would be considered treason. At the time, he thought it was an exaggeration. Looking back, he is no longer sure. There are also disturbing hints of ethical boundaries being crossed. Some documents reference human limits testing, a phrase that appears repeatedly without explanation. Survivors describe physical and psychological strain unlike anything they experienced elsewhere in the war. Sleeplessness, disorientation, and memory gaps were common. One operative claimed that certain devices affected not only the enemy, but the user as well, leaving lasting effects that followed them long after the war ended. Medical records, where they exist, show unusual diagnoses, conditions that do not fit known wartime injuries. Doctors' notes are sparse, sometimes cryptic, as if they lacked the language to describe what they observed. In several cases, records end abruptly with a transfer to an unknown facility. No discharge papers, no death certificates, just silence. As the Cold War began, the shadow deepened. Suddenly, new military doctrines emerged that seemed to assume capabilities never publicly demonstrated. Electronic warfare, psychological operations, stealth concepts all appeared remarkably mature for their time. Some researchers believe these doctrines were not born in the Cold War, but inherited from earlier, hidden experiments. If Project Blackwing existed, it may have been the seed from which modern covert warfare grew. The official narrative resists this idea. Histories emphasize gradual development, incremental innovation, and post-war research. Yet the leaps sometimes appear too large, too sudden. Technologies seem to arrive already refined, as if tested long before their supposed debut. This fuels speculation that wartime programs provided a secret proving ground, one erased to maintain plausible timelines and protect sensitive origins. Silence can be as telling as evidence. When historians request access to certain files, they are often told the documents do not exist. Yet references to them appear elsewhere, like ghosts in footnotes and appendices. This contradiction suggests deliberate obfuscation, a paper trail designed to lead nowhere. The absence becomes a presence, an indicator that something is being actively concealed. Whistleblowers who attempted to connect these dots describe pressure to stop. Funding withdrawn. Careers stalled. In some cases, subtle threats delivered through intermediaries. Nothing overt, nothing that could be proven, but enough to make continuing the investigation feel dangerous. This pattern repeats across decades, reinforcing the sense that the subject remains sensitive even now. The question then shifts from whether such a unit existed to why the secret still matters. If the technology was abandoned, why continue the cover-up? If it evolved, what does that mean for modern warfare? Some speculate that revealing the truth would expose capabilities still in use, or ethical violations that could undermine trust. Others fear it would raise questions about accountability for those erased from history. The human cost is impossible to ignore. Men and women recruited into secrecy, denied recognition, and potentially sacrificed to experiments the public will never know. Their stories, fragmented and incomplete, linger like echoes. Each fragment suggests a larger truth just out of reach, a narrative deliberately shattered to prevent reconstruction. As the investigation deepens, one unsettling thought emerges. What if this is not unique? What if Project Blackwing was only one of many such units, each hidden, each erased, each contributing to a shadow history beneath the official one? If so, the story of World War II may be far stranger, far darker, than we have been led to believe. And the most disturbing question remains unanswered. If a lost spy unit with impossible technology could be erased once, could it happen again? Could similar programs exist today, operating beyond oversight, shaping events without public knowledge? The silence that surrounds Project Blackwing may not be a relic of the past, but a warning that some truths are still being actively buried.